Hey, this is Carrie with Canary Quilts, and it is week 30 of Dear Jane Quilt Along. My gosh, I can't even believe I'm saying that. I'm so glad you guys have stuck with me for this long. I'm so glad that if you started this, you're still here. I'm so glad that if you are picking it up again, you're still here, and I just really appreciate you. And I love seeing your blocks. So share them on social media with hashtag Dear Jane QAL and tag Canary Quilts, and I will share them on my channel. So this week, oh, and don't forget to, if you're new here, to hit the subscribe button, notification bell, and you'll get notified of Dear Jane content and all the other content we got going on here. So this week is like last week, except we don't have any applique. That's about the biggest difference. No modifications, not using any variations, and the blocks are pretty straightforward foundation paper piecing. So let me fill in my color chart. Let me know if you're doing the color chart. Is anybody else doing this? I like doing the color chart, and I like doing the photo quilt. So yeah, I think it's really exciting just to see how much you're filling in and to kind of get an idea of what colors are where. But anyway, let's set blocks here. We are... Looks like I'm using green this week. I'm using all batiks if you're new here. So I am just randomly pulling out batiks and picking colors. So let's start with D9 Uncle Richard. And we have done a block like this. I feel like it might have been called Album. Yeah, G9 is very similar to this one, except that there's some extra squares in the middle. That's about it. So we have done this block before. I've been kind of going through these and looking, and we've done a lot of, I feel like we're getting to the point where we've done a lot of these types of pieces before. But anyway, D9 Uncle Richard. Next we have G2 Mohawk Trail. And what's kind of cool about this is it's a bunch of half square triangles that are just turned in a certain way. Even though I'm going to be foundation paper piecing, I've done blocks like this with half square triangles. So G2 Mohawk Trail is in there. And then we've got I1 Ralph and Nelda's Wedding. So I1, yep, I1. Ralph and Nelda's Wedding. You know, this one looks a lot like M5, except the corners don't have the borders. It's got a 9 patch instead of a 4 patch, so it's kind of the same block. Like I said, we're kind of running into the same things here. All right, M11 Rickshaw. Is that Rickshaw? Yep, Rickshaw. M11. And then finally we have BR4 Candy Dish. And as we always do on this bottom one, we rotate 180 degrees. Again, we're really filling in that bottom, and we need to start filling in that top. All right, let's go take a look at these blocks real quick. Like I said, no variations, no modifications, no applique. So just going to run through these real quick and let you look at them before you get into your own EQ8. All right, D9 Uncle Richard. So these green corners in the center are what's different from the other block that we did that's identical to this. And it was probably laid out just like this. I'd have to go back and look. I don't know if there was a border around it. But anyway, sections are nice and laid out here. So that's what it looks like. And you can just kind of pull everything over here, rearrange it so you can get everything on the same page. And then you only have to print one page. All right, let's take a look at the next block. G2 Mohawk Trail. That's what it looks like. And like I said, it's just a bunch of half square triangles just rearranged into this pattern. And if we do foundation paper piece, it is simply by row here. So basically we're going to be alternating colors practically, just going back and forth putting these on. But anyway, it's not going to be bad at all. So just by row, that's going to be pretty easy. We've done that also. Next block is Ralph and Nelda's Wedding, I1. And like I said, the other block that's very similar to this actually probably was harder because it had this outside border. This is just a 9 patch in the 2 corners, and that's how it's going to be set up on foundation paper piecing. And I think that's about how it was set up before too. Preview. Yeah, it's going to be a fun week. Next block, M11 Rickshaw. That's what it looks like. What does it look like on foundation paper piece? There is no Y seams. You put this together on the angle here and in the middle. So yeah, should be an easy week again. We need it. We need an easy week. Then we have BR4 candy dish. This one looks like one of those that's put together. Each section here is going to be a part of it. But let's take a look. Nope. The whole top is its own section. That's awesome. And then 2 sections in the bottom. So look at that. Look at that. Just making a bunch of flying geese right there. All right, so that's the blocks this week. Like I said, it's not going to be hard. I don't even think it's going to be labor intensive. I'm looking forward to it. And we've done a lot of this before in our blocks. But anyway, hit the subscribe button, notification bell, and let's get started on our blocks.
Let's get started on week 30. I can't even believe that. Week 30. We have got D9 Uncle Richard. I don't anticipate this being too hard. What I think I'll do is I'll just put together one of these small corners because they're like the big corners, except there's just extra pieces. So you'll do exactly the same thing. And then we've just got these 3 patch, 4 patch ones in the middle. Those are pretty simple. My cut pieces, which I do give you on my website, if you want to use my cut pieces, that link is in the description down below. So you can go out there and grab those dimensions. I've got triangles, which are all in the corners. These 2 squares, this 1 rectangle, these green squares, and they're in the middle too, and the rectangles in here. We also, which I guess I need to cut, didn't cut those. We have borders. There are borders around this. So I'm going to get these cut too. That will be on your cut pieces. And I'm going to get set up to just do this small piece right here. I have gone ahead and put together the rest of these pieces. These other 2 corner pieces are going to be just like this one. You're just going to have an extra triangle here on each end. So got those done. All my pieces fit really well. The center here's done. And then I did cut these borders and I attached them to my papers. So I have triangles, a square, a dark square, and a dark rectangle ready to go. I've drawn my seam lines. We're starting here with this triangle, and these are plenty big. Let's see, it needs to be oriented like this. It's off the paper. It's about 1/4 of an inch over number 2. I'm going to take my green square and lay this down, and we have plenty of room on each side of this seam. So I am going to sew on the line between 1 and 2. There's my first 2 pieces. Number 3 is over here, but we could do 3 and 4 at the same time, and I might just do that. I'm going to trim both sides. I'm going to trim for 3 and for 4. All right. So 3 and 4 seams don't touch each other, so I can take my 2 triangles over and do these at the same time at the sewing machine. So our triangle is going to be oriented like that. Flip it over. Make sure I've got at least 1/4 of an inch past this line right here. We'll sew on the line right here, and I'm going to do the exact same thing over here on this side with this triangle. There we go. I did both sides with my triangles right here. Went really well. Now we can put on our last piece, which is number 5, and it's going to be the long green rectangle. And that's plenty big. Here's my seam allowances right there. So I'm going to get this one sewn up and we'll get it trimmed up and we'll get all our pieces laid out. Here's my pieces all trimmed up and laid out. So you got your two center pieces here and you want your white strip to be in between these, and then you want them to be oriented, so we're going to be putting the green strips from these short corners onto this row, and then we'll be able to put these corners on. Then what we have over here is we have a long, two mediums, and a short strip. So once we have the center arranged, we can put on the short strip, then we can put on the two mediums and then the long. I'm going to be ironing towards the corners. This one I am going to iron towards the center piece, and then everything else I'm going to iron towards the corners and the strips. That's a fun block. D9 Uncle Richard. What do you think? I like my colors I chose. That's a cool block. Next up we have G2 Mohawk Trail. These are the foundation paper pieces that you can use to put this together. There's 4 rows. Each row starts at the top and just moves down. Because they're all half square triangles, I'm not going to foundation paper piece this. I am actually going to use the It's So Emma half square triangles, or triangles on a roll is what it's called. And these are the half square triangles. And I'm using the 1.5 inch finished half square triangle because I measured this and it's a little less than, I think it's less than a 1 1/4 even finished. So I'm going to do the 1.5 inch finished half square triangles and trim them down. If you don't have that, you can just take 2.5 inch squares, 8 2.5 inch squares, and make your half square triangles. With these, you can mark down the center, and then you would put a 1/4 inch seam on each side of the centers, cut, and then you can iron it open and trim it down. I'll do that and I'll show you that, but I just wanted to let you know I'm going to do this. I really like using these. They have tons of different sizes. I happen to be doing Fat Quarter Shop's Quilt Along Piece and Quilt, which they had a whole box full of different sizes of these. So I didn't happen to have anything smaller. Well, I have 1 inch, but that's too small. So I'm using the 1.5 inch half square triangles. What I did was I cut 2 rows because each row cuts or makes 8 squares. So I only need 2 rows because I need 16 squares. Then all I did was go over to my fabric and just cut a piece that's bigger than this. I didn't even use my ruler. I just put my paper down and cut around it so that I had extra fabric on each side. And that's it. So if you're unfamiliar with these, I'll have a link in the description down below. You can check it out. I use these all the time. I love them. And I'm going to use them here also. But if you don't have them and you don't want to purchase them, all you have to do is make 16 half square triangles out of 8 2.5 inch squares of dark and light. So first thing I want to do is, if you don't have these, I'm going to show you this, and then you can make a bunch of those. So I'm going to go over to my machine. I'm going to use my 1/4 inch foot. I'm going to put the 1/4 inch right here on this diagonal line, and that way it will sew a seam 1/4 inch next to this line, and I'm going to do it on both sides. There you go. Those are what my seams look like. They're each 1/4 inch from that center diagonal, and then you can either use rotary cutter or scissors and just cut along that line. And then when you open it, you have your half square triangle block. So the next thing you would do would be to iron this out and then trim it down to the size that we would need here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my It's So Emma, and the way that I do that is I just pin the paper down. You would have, I'm using a batik, so you would have right sides together for your fabrics. But since I'm using a batik, I don't really have a right or wrong side. And you would pin inside just to hold this down. There we go. And then I'm going to go over to my machine, and with a small stitch, just like with paper piecing, I'm going to follow the arrows and sew on the dotted line all the way around. Just follow the arrows, sew on that dashed line. And then I'll be able to cut on the solid line. So I'm going to get all this sewn up. There we go. I've got all my seams sewn on the dashed line. Now what I'm going to do is cut it on the solid line. And the edge is also a solid line. That's my longest edge, so I want to cut that first. All right, there we go. I got all the edges cut. Now I'm going to cut down the middle. And now that I cut down the middle, I can take a smaller ruler and just start cutting the squares out. All right, I got all the squares cut. Now I can cut down the diagonal. And I have a half square triangle. Need to iron it, and then I'm going to trim it down. I've got all my half square triangles. These are the paper piece ones I did. These are the traditionally made ones. What we need to do is now cut them down to 1 5/8 inches so that we can get a 1 1/8 inch finish size. So I'm going to put my 45-degree angle line on my seam and then line it up on the edges at 1 5/8 inches. And then trim the tail. So that's what a traditional one looks like. Pretty much the same thing. I'm going to do the same thing with my paper piece one. Put my 45-degree degree line on my seam and line it up at 1 5/8 inches and trim. It's a much more square block when you paper piece it like this too. All right, I'm going to get this finished up and then we'll lay our block out. There's all my pieces cut and laid out. I am going to put this together so that I'm going to put this together in rows, or yeah, rows like this. And I'm going to make sure each row just, first row will probably go to the left, second row to the right, third row to the left, fourth row to the right, so that I can make sure that my seams are nested like that. I just want to let you know that I will have cut pieces for the foundation paper piece when you go to my website and you download the my cut pieces. I will have cut pieces for this too if you're doing the foundation paper piece. You don't have to do the half square triangle method. Anyway, that's how I'm going to put this together and iron it, and we'll be done with this block. There we go. That is my version of G2 Mohawk Trail. Like I said, if you're going to be doing the paper piece, I will have paper piece cut pieces on my website. There you go. I'm not sure about this block. I have a hard time finding the pattern. What do you think? Next we have I-1 Ralph and Nelda's wedding. We did one similar to this last week. It was a little more involved than this. So I'm quickly will do one of these and then we'll put it together. But these two big squares are right here, and then these squares are all the rest of the pieces here. So let me get set up and we'll do one of these bigger pieces. Here's the pieces I put together. Super easy to put together. Did not take me any time at all to do these. So I'm going to do this one real quick. This is what it looks like. Here's the seam lines. We're just going to start in the middle on this one. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to take a dark and a light and just put it together. Number 1 is a dark. Oops. And so I'm going to put dark on the bottom, put it over number 2, and that's my seam allowance, so we have plenty of room there. and I'm 1/4 of an inch over here off this seam line. So I'm going to sew on the line between A1 and A2. There's my first 2 pieces. I've trimmed for my third. I'm going to take a white square. Looks like I have 2 extras. Line it up on my dark piece, and we're going to sew on the line between A1 and A3, and I lock stitch at intersections like this. There we go. 3 pieces, looks just like these right here. Now I've trimmed for my 1/4 inch, and I'm going to put the big dark piece. Line it up, sew on the line, and then we'll get everything trimmed up and put it together. Here's my pieces trimmed up. This is how they're laid out. These 2 big pieces go in the corner, and then we just need to alternate colors here. So we just need to sew this together, sew it together down here, and we'll have 2 rows, and they're going to meet at this seam anyway, and that's going to be nested. So I think that I will just iron these seams open. Look at that block. That is a cool looking block. It was easy to do, but I don't know. I like that. I like the fabrics I chose for this one. They're really cool looking in it. Anyway, that is I-1, Ralph and Nelda's wedding. It says this was named for my cousin Ralph and Nelda's anniversary. Really. Next up is M11 Rickshaw. This looks like a fun block to put together. So if you didn't see my EQ8, this is a row, this is a row, and this is a row. So it looks like there might be Y seams. There are no Y seams here. And I think most of these are going to be almost exactly alike to put together. If you want to use my cut pieces, you can find them at the link to my website in the description below. So let me go through these. These long white ones are the edges here. These short rectangles are all the little triangles you see here, and these triangles in here. These longer, or these bigger, actually they're the biggest rectangle, are for these 2 pieces, C4 and A3, and then these rectangles are for these skinny triangles out here. And then all of our dark is exactly the same because we have all the same diamonds. So let's put one of these together, and that should apply to the rest of this. I've gone ahead and put everything together, but this piece right here, and I'm glad I saved that piece out to show you how I approached it. These pieces are pretty simple. These 2, or I guess it's 1. It's just 3 in a row, and then this is exactly like that piece, except you're adding one over there. I've tacked down my borders here to my papers. And then on, let's get these face up. On this one, see we start in the corner right here? That's my preferred spot to start. One of these, F, starts here. Could be, matching seams, whatever EQ8 looks at, but I'm not that worried about it. What you would have to do if you started here is you'd have to somehow pin this piece down, trim it, and then put this on. And all the rest of them start in the corner. So I'm just started this one in the corner. So I made this 1, this 2, and this 3. Whoops. That's not correct. I don't know where my eraser is. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and this is 4. So I would just change this one, F, to be just like E and G, where you start in the corner, and then you go in the middle, and you come back to the corner, and then you go out. And I want to do the same thing here. So I'm going to start in the corner. I'm going to go to my dark, and then I'm just going to finish this corner out and do the big piece, just like that. So when you have pieces that don't intersect, you can do things like that. And there probably is seams that may match up But I'm not that worried about that. I think it's just going to be easier to put it together like this. And I put 3 over here, 1, 2, and 4. So there's my seams. So now I can just take a small rectangle, put it over my 1/4 of an inch into my 2. I have seam allowance overage here. And then I'm just going to take my green and line it up right here. And I made it plenty big so that when it flips over, you have plenty of space out to here. Plus it's on an angle, so you'll be able to catch it down here. And now I am going to sew right here between 1 and 2. First 2 pieces are on. I have plenty of fabric there. I have trimmed for 3. And now I just need to take another rectangle, line it up in the corner. Here's my seam allowance. So I'm going to have coverage, and now we can sew between 2 and 3. First 3 pieces I've trimmed for 4, and now we can take our long rectangle. I am going to, here's my seam allowances. I'm pulling it over closer to this straight edge so that I have enough room for when it folds over to hit that right there. All right, now we can sew here between 2 and 4. I'm going to get everything trimmed up and we'll lay this out to put together. Here's my pieces trimmed up and laid out. So these 2 pieces and this center piece are in the middle. And then all of these pieces that were alike are set this way for these outer rows. So we just need to put this together in rows. We have a short edge, we have 2 medium edges and a long edge, and that's how they'll go on. Short first, then 2 mediums, and then that one. Let's see how these line up with the notches. So looks like it lines up with right along this edge, right to that notch and this notch. So I am going to, I think I'll try ironing all of these open till I get to the outer edge, and then I'm going to iron towards the strip. There we go, M11 Rickshaw. That's what hers looks like. That's what mine looks like. And we kind of have a green theme going on this week. That really wasn't that hard to put together, and it really didn't take a lot of time either. That's fun. Okay, last block is our border block, BR4 candy dish. I could use a candy dish right about now. Anyway, this is what it's going to look like. And we only have 3 sections. These 2, these aren't going to be difficult at all. I don't anticipate this one being difficult. They want you to start here. You could start there. And you really could start here and do 1, 2, 3, and then I think you could come up here and finish these out with 4 and 5. And then the rest of them are going to be exactly the same. We're going to add the big dark triangle and then the 2 corners. Big dark triangle, 2 corners, all the way down. So I think that's how I'm going to do it. I'm just going to finish it out at the top and then work towards the bottom. So this little tiny piece right there will have to be 4 because it crosses with that seam right there. And then this will be 5. You don't have to do it like me. You can do it exactly as it's numbered. So I have a lot of pieces here. There's a lot of different sizes going on. And so I do have my cut pieces out on my website, and I have the link down below. I have a little cheat sheet that tells me where to put everything, which I'm going to use for this, so I'm not going to go through my pieces, but you can grab my cut sizes at my website if you want to use them. All right, not going to do these. I'll get this started. But like I said, once you get past this row, it's all going to be the same. Here's the 2 bottom sections that I put together. Those were very easy to put together. Didn't take very long. Set those aside. Now we can do our section A. And again, I told you I was just changing the order up a little bit. So I'm going to start with this dark piece and then move my second piece down here to this corner. And then I'm going to move up here for number 4 and number 5. and then we're just gonna, same thing, when we get to here, we're gonna be doing dark, then light, light, dark, light, light. So I'm not gonna change the numbering because I'll know that. So I've drawn it out on the back, and I need to take a dark for my number 1 because that's where I'm starting, and lay it over number 2. And it's about 1/4 of an inch to this point on number 2. I'm using squares, so I'm just going to line it up since it's such a tiny little point or triangle. And I'm going to sew right here, lock stitching at that point and coming out here. Okay, there we go. There's my first 2 pieces. Now we're going to turn it over, and my third piece is this other little white triangle, so we can trim there. And just going to take another one of my squares here. So it's hard to see, but our triangle's right there. So I need to just, my piece is plenty big. So I'm just gonna kind of center it there. Sew on the line right here between 1 and 3 and lock stitch at that point. All right, first 3 pieces. Let's go over here. My number 4 that I'm doing is this tiny little piece right there. So we need to trim it up. Man, that's going to be a tiny little seam. And that's a white. I'm going to take my white square, and you can't even see the piece under there. See, there's number 4. So kind of center it there. I'm going to sew on this line, lock stitching at that point. It's plenty big for number 4, which is right in here. Turn this over. Now we're going to do number 5, which is the peak of our block. So we can trim that up. Again, I'm going to use a square for that. And basically the edge of the paper is my seam allowance. I'm beyond that, and I'm beyond the paper over here, so we have plenty of fabric. So now we can sew right along this line between A2 and my A5. And there we go. That's how we create our diamond at the top. So next we're going to come back down here between our top piece and the next dark piece. I gotta turn it over. I don't know what I was thinking. And we are going to trim, and I'm going to use one of these. Excuse me, Mr. Jingles. Excuse me. Nope, excuse me, Mr. Jingles. Come here. All right, I'm going to take my dark piece. You can see, whoops, you can see the coverage right here. That's the square, or the triangle we want. I'm just going to center it and then sew on the line between our top section we just did and that dark piece. A4 is what it says here, but you know what I mean. There's the next piece for our triangle, and now we can trim next to the, on the white next to that triangle. Grab another white at this point square, and you can see it peeking out right here. And there's my seam allowance, is basically the edge of the paper, so still have a big enough piece. Sew on the line right here and lock stitch at that point. There we go. There's our corner white piece. Turn it over. We need to do A6 exactly like that. It's A6 on here. It is not the 6th piece. And grab another white square. You can see our piece right here. Edge is the seam allowance. Center it. Sew on the line right here and lock stitch at that point. And now every single row show the bottom is exactly like this row. So I'm going to finish it out, get it trimmed up. There we go. There's the finished pieces trimmed up. All we have to do is put these two pieces together and then put this strip to the bottom. So let's see how these notches line up. All right. This notch lines up right there with that edge. So I'm going to get this sewn up, and I think I will iron towards B3. There we go. That worked out great because this is ironed towards B3, and so is this side. So it looks like this sits in front of these two. Now we need to put the top and bottom together, and I think we're going to end up with just a little bit of the tails sticking off on each side. I've sewn them together. I think I'm going to iron towards this bottom strip away from the point. There we go. That is BR4 candy dish. That is a nice looking block. I really like it. And it was fun to put together.
All right, week 30 is over. It's crazy how fast it's going. Look at this quilt getting filled in. I love doing these blocks this week. It was fun. I love how I had all greens this week. I don't know that I planned that. I picked these colors out for each week a while ago, but they turned out really cool. So let me know how it went for you. How did the blocks go for you? Did you end up paper piecing this one, or how did you put this one together? It's not hard any way that you do it, but there are several ways that you can do it. So let's populate my photo quilt before we leave and see how that's going to look. So I have D9 Uncle Richard. I have G2 Mohawk Trail. I1 Ralph and Nelda's Wedding. M11 Rickshaw. And then BR4 Candy Dish. I already had that one turned. Oh, we are going to have a row filled in here one of these days, or one of these weeks, I should say. It's like, oh my gosh, look at this. It's so cool looking. Anyway, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button, notification bell. You can do this, you can watch, or you can just have fun with all the other stuff we got going on here. And I really do appreciate you, and I love to hear from you. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.